Welcome to the Good Food CFO podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Delavan, joined as always by our producer, Chelsea Steer. Chelsea, I have got a warm take for you today.
Okay. What is this warm take about?
Well, a few weeks ago now, the news broke that Pepsi would be purchasing Siete Foods for $1.2 billion. And unless you were probably in a remote place with no internet connection, you heard this news and then you also heard a lot of hot takes on social media and the internet in general. I myself did share an initial thought, but I started to see so many hot takes and so many different opinions that I think in true form for me wanted to sit back a little bit and observe what was being said and how other people were feeling about this sale before really giving my full opinion and take on the situation. I had a couple of people reaching out to me on social saying what is your take? We want you to weigh in. And my response was basically I will, and I'm going to do it in a longer format. And I want to think about it a little bit. So I've taken the time to do that. And so it's not quite a hot take. It's a warm take.
Yeah. One that's been marinating.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess for those tuning in, let's start from the very beginning before we even get into this, right?
Sure.
You already said we're talking about Pepsi buying out Siete Foods. What do we need to know about this transaction, I guess we'll call it, this deal, before we get into your take?
Yeah. I think the most important piece here is the type of business that Siete Foods is. So it is a family-founded business. While I was marinating on things, I did go back and listen to, one of the founders and the creative director really of the brand, the woman who develops the recipes. Her name is Veronica Garza. And, she was on Second Life. She was on, I believe, How I Built This. I really listened to her talk. And the thing that really sticks out in their story is that, they're a family from Laredo, Texas that tortillas and rice and beans is a part of their heritage. It's a part of their diet. And as a family, they embarked on weight loss and exercise together. They started to do CrossFit. They started to eat a paleo lifestyle. And she, in fact, has autoimmune disorders, several of them. And so changing the way that she ate, cutting out flours and certain grains really improved her quality of life and also really fit in with how the family was starting to eat as a whole. Things out meant no tortillas. And that was difficult for her. So after, a certain amount of time without that ingredient in her life, without that product in her life, she started to play around with an almond flour version of it. And I share this because this is a product that was made out of a need, which is the case for so many good food brands and founders, right, that we talk to and work with. It filled a hole in the marketplace. And from that initial product, which actually launched under a different name that I cannot remember off the top of my head right now, but it's very kind of silly. Definitely we'll put a link to there's a photo of the side by side of the original brand before they became Siete Foods. But, they launched with tortillas, they launched super locally, and then they sort of blew up. They were launched nationally by Whole Foods after sort of being discovered. And there's some luck in this story, right? They had a great product. They were discovered by someone who was on a yacht with the CEO of Whole Foods and told them hey, you've got to get this product in your stores,
Yeah.
and it worked out. So, I mean, it's a fun part of their story, but the brand grew into tortilla chips and queso and this, breadth of products that continued to fill the need of so many consumers. And people who buy better for you products desire independent ownership of that company. They take pride in that, right? And so when a company that is independently owned is better for you, sells to someone like Pepsi, which goes against everything that a better for you consumer stands for and a better for you brand stands for, there is a lot of opinions about that. There are a lot of opinions from consumers. There are a lot of opinions from other good food founders. There's just a lot of opinions in general. There's zero shortage of opinions, but I think that the type of business, how the business was founded, the fact that it was a minority owned business, all of those factors really play into why there was so much conversation about it, as well as the hefty price tag of $1.2 billion.
Yeah. And what I hear from you, Sarah, or maybe what I'm extrapolating from you right now, is that there's a lot more nuance here,
Mhm.
right? Than just a good food business selling to a conglomerate.
Yeah.
All right, Sarah. Well, I'm ready to get into it and hear your warm take. As a good food founder, do you ever feel like your work is done in a silo? Is it difficult to feel confident in your business and financial decisions because you don't have a sounding board? Well, in our weekly CFO office hours, you'll not only get the chance to work shoulder to shoulder with the Good Food CFO herself, Sarah Delavan, but also with a small group of your peers. Together, you can support each other through the work of building a business on your own terms. Passes are available now on our website. Just visit thegoodfoodcfo.com and click on coaching. And now back to the show. So, Sarah, you said that you wanted to take your time to really think about how you felt about this and like what your opinion was, what you wanted to say about it, like in this long form. But I do want to know, like, when people were reaching out and asking you for your take, for your opinion, did you have any, initial thoughts right off the bat?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I heard the news, I definitely had a few initial thoughts, and I don't quite remember like the order of operations of those thoughts, but I too did have a small hot take, to be fair. And I did share just in our Instagram stories my initial feelings, which were sadness about an independent brand being consolidated into an industry giant, because that's even more of the snack and dip, shelf space that is now owned by PepsiCo, right? And so there's definitely feelings that I have around that. And because there's so many implications that come along with consolidation. At the same time, I also felt and shared that if Siete's goal, if the goal of the family to grow a business and to sell it, then great. They did that. And if they were able to build the business that they wanted to on their terms in the process, that's amazing, right? That's literally what we want for founders. But on the flip side of that, right, there were investors in that business, there were advisors in that business. And I also know that that means that they too were getting a payout, with this Pepsi sale. And I think that's where some of my wonder comes from around, or my hope that the founders really wanted this, because I think that a harsh reality or truth of this industry is that there's a lot of money to be made, not necessarily by brands in every instance, but by retailers, by distributors, by investors, by advisors, by experts who can make money coaching brands to be the biggest and to go into national distribution. And so I had some thoughts and feelings around that and just some hopes, but I definitely didn't have opinions on or about the family or about the company selling to Pepsi, because it's not a black and white thing. There's so much
Yeah.
nuance here. And as I shared in the story, it was like, here's my thought, but here's the other side of that thought. Here's my hope, but here's the other thing I know about it. So it's nuanced, and there's a dichotomy to the whole thing. And that, I think, once I very quickly realized that, that's when I said to myself, I want to listen and see what's going on here and see what people are feeling and thinking so that I can form my own thoughts about this and my own opinions.
Yeah. And that's my next question, because I know that you said you wanted to sit back, you wanted to listen to what other people were saying. And I'm curious, what were other people saying? Like, what were the takes that you were hearing out there?
There were so many, right? And I think it's important. I love that you're asking this question, because there's consumers, right? There's others in the industry, other founders, right? And each kind of group of people had a slightly different opinion. And I think, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, the better for you brand consumer was concerned and or disappointed, right? They were disappointed that the brand, quote unquote, sold out. The truth there is that they have no idea what this industry is like. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind, right? Like, they likely believe that if a bag of chips is on sale, for $6 at the store, the brand is getting at least three. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so the assumption is that, it's a big business. They sell a lot. They must be making money. And so why would you stop doing that and sell to a company like Pepsi? And so people were disappointed. But I think the reality there is they don't know what really goes on in a CPG brand. And so they're disappointed, I think, out of fear. And I think they're disappointed perhaps out of the idea of consolidation. And some people also voice their concern about the possibility of the brand changing, meaning that the ingredients would change or the quality would change, or just, a host of potential negative things about the products themselves.
Yeah.
The other group, which I found really interesting, was sort of the better for you industry experts, news sources, dietitians. They are very excited about this because their take on it is that don't be worried about the sale. This means that there's going to be broader reach and more availability of this product. From their point of view, they want more people to have access to a brand like Siete Foods. And so they're happy about it. They believe that the item may become less expensive on shelf in addition to being, more widely available. They often pointed to other brands who had been purchased by, corporations in the past, and how not only did their product become more widely available, but they were, expanding the product line, new flavors, new sauces, things like that. So they feel good about it. And many of them felt very strongly that the product wouldn't change because, in their opinions, like, Pepsi knows better than to upset the core customer of Siete Foods, right? Why would you buy a brand and then
Mm-hmm.
immediately or even down the road change things, and lose that core customer base? So that was a really interesting kind of group of people to observe and get their opinions. There's, of course, the investors and the advisors who are like, this is amazing. This is the goal for all, CPG startups, and this is what, we want them to do. And this is the dream. And of course it is, because if you're an investor or an advisor who gets a payout, like, that's what you want, right?
Yeah.
But also they may have genuine, cares about there being broader reach for this product as well. I'm not attempting to know exactly what they're thinking. I'm just repeating sort of the, things that I've seen, online. And the last group, that I listen to most often, because in my social media feeds, like, I follow CPG founders as well as industry experts, but a lot of founders. And I really wanted to hear what they had to say, what their take was. I think there were a few who felt like, oh, I wish they didn't sell, but overwhelmingly, particularly from CPG founders, what I heard was, this is the dream. They're saying things like, we started this business for a good reason, and the margins are so tight. And I have worked so hard. I would love to sell this business for $1.2 billion. And I trust that whomever I choose to sell it to would maintain the quality, right? Maybe I would stay on for a few years and make sure that happened. Maybe I would stay on for a few years and do product development and still be involved in some way. But they fully understand why Siete would sell, and they often and in many cases are like, if I had that chance right now, I would, because they're in situations where they're not making money in their business oftentimes, right? Some of them I know personally, some of them I, of course, don't. And so, you know, most founders in the CPG space, I feel, believe that low margin, high volume is the way to grow, is the way to operate. And with that comes this belief that national, you know, is also the way to success for a brand. And so, you know, I see and I understand why they have those opinions. And where that led me to ultimately was, how do we break this cycle? How do we free founders from this feeling, this very real feeling and reality? It's not just a feeling, it's a reality that they are in, so that we can break the consolidation like cycle, right? Like,
Mhm.
why is it that a good food founder who works so hard creates something that their ultimate goal would be to sell to a Pepsi of the world? It's not that I think that they are wrong for having that desire. I think that the industry is so broken, and they, founders, including myself, right, didn't know how broken this industry really truly is, how corrupt it really truly is, until you're in it. It's something
Yeah.
we're trying to change here, right? But when you don't know that, and you still have a product and a brand that you believe in and you want to see it exist, the path forward looks and feels like selling to a larger company. We don't have, which we don't currently, big brands who are doing things differently, right? Like, not trying to consolidate, like, and I don't know what that looks like, but like, then who else is there to sell to except a conglomerate, you know,
Yeah.
and to kind of keep the cycle going. And where all of this led me to is A, the fact that we live in a capitalist society, and B, the question of, how do we break this cycle of consolidation? I don't think that it falls solely on the shoulders of founders, and it shouldn't. I also don't think that we have to wait until some new form of, supply chain becomes the status quo for things to change. I think things are changing, but need to continue to change. I think people, as I may have mentioned earlier, need to rethink what success looks like. I don't think it's being the number one X brand in the country. I think it's being the brand that's having the biggest financial impact on its founder, its team, and its community, that's increasing access to food, right? Like, can we reimagine success in the food industry? Can we reimagine how we're doing this so we don't have to wait for some future time, and that creating the change doesn't mean the founder not being rewarded in some way?
You talk about breaking the cycle of consolidation. And just a minute ago, you were talking about, you didn't know what you didn't know before
Yeah.
getting into the food industry. And I know that you pulled some stats. I'd love for you to share, because I think it really speaks to what we do need to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to. So, as I was taking all of this information in and really thinking about how we break this cycle of consolidation, I also was thinking about how much room there really is on national grocers' shelves for brands. And I was curious about the numbers. And so I did a little bit of research and I found the following data. So, first of all, I want to share that 30% of the CPG industry is made up of food and beverage products, meaning that, like, the greater consumer packaged goods industry, which includes like healthcare and beauty, things of that nature, of that entire industry, 30% is food and beverage. And according to Nielsen's, 30,000 new CPG businesses launch every year. So if we take 30% of that 30,000, that gives us 9,000 new food and beverage businesses launching per year. And if each of those is launching one product, right, at the time of its launch, that's 9,000 new products in the food and beverage space every year that Nielsen's is able to track, right? I have a feeling the number is probably higher than that. So when we think about those numbers alone, right, you start to realize that there's not enough room on the national shelves for that many brands. Even if you take consolidation and monopolization of grocery shelves out of it, right, there's not enough room for everyone. And not only is there not enough room for everyone, but the road to getting onto that national shelf is very expensive, right? It is a pay to play industry with a lot of corruption built in at every single level, from retailer to distributor. You are sharing margins, right? You are paying for new item setup fees, for free fills, for slotting fees. There are required promotions that stores will have. Some are going to require you to have everyday low prices. There's going to be ad fees. There's going to be crazy things like needing to pay a percentage of your sales to a distributor for the use of a software that they require you to use. So it's a very, very expensive road to the national shelf with very limited space available. Does it mean that the likelihood of you landing on a national grocery shelf and staying there long term is low? Yes. And does it mean that doing it and making money while doing it is even lower? Yes. But do I think that that means that people shouldn't start new food and beverage businesses? No. I do, however, think that we need to change how people think about building CPG brands and what the definition of success is.
Specifically speaking to success, I mean, everything you just listed out between the limited shelf space, the cost to get in, right? All of those things seems like a big uphill battle
Mm-hmm.
and is going to take even more for me to feel successful in that realm. Where when we look at, when we did the episode around pulling out of retail, right?
Mm-hmm.
It what we saw and what you showed with the two founders that we talked to in that episode, that by doing less, they actually made more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's such a big message that I hope people hear loud and clear from not just this episode and that episode that you mentioned, but many of our episodes, right? It's not about selling more. It's not about that top line revenue number. It's about where can we have an impact and actually make money as a business. You know, the number of founders out there who still are not paying themselves or paying themselves well, despite having impressive sales numbers, is far too high, in my opinion. And beyond that, there is a need for better food in our country, right?
Yes.
There is a need for food, period, in lots of parts of our country. And there is a need to end industry consolidation, monopolization of wealth, exploitation of workers, right? In particular, like on farms, in processing plants, in factories. And again, I don't want to imply that solving this massive industry problem is in the hands or on the shoulders of founders. But I also don't think that we have to wait for someone else to change the industry for founders to be successful, for more people to be fed, and for more good food to be available to people. And so when I say despite all of these things that go on in the industry, despite the corruption and the consolidation, I think people should still be launching food brands. It's because we need you. We need good food available outside of national grocery.
All of this is making me think about a company, a business that I read about earlier. We're going to share in an upcoming episode that is doing exactly that, right? They're
Yeah.
breaking the mold. They have a business model that is completely different. They're not waiting for anyone else to create a regional supply chain, a
Right.
local supply chain. They're taking that charge. And again, I don't think that you're saying everybody out there that's starting a food business, it's on you, right? You've said
Right.
the exact opposite. But knowing that we back you up
Mm-hmm.
in trying something different, I just think that's huge.
Yeah, I think, you shared that article with me and I'm excited to talk about that in more detail, in the future. But I think you sharing it here is a great example of not having to wait for someone else, but also rethinking the model, right? I want to be very clear that you can't take this model that is used on a national scale and just simply shrink it down,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's not necessarily going to work. There are strategies and looking at the numbers in a unique way for each individual business based on where you are, what you're producing, who you want to work with, what the cost of your product are. Like all of these things come into play, right? And so building a business on your own terms is a lot of things. It's taking on the amount of debt that you feel comfortable with. It's getting as big as you want to be. It's serving the communities that you want to serve. It's having the impact that you want to have. In no way do either of us believe that those things are going to be the same for every single person. But the important piece there is that it has to be a good strategy, right? You have to look at your reality and what you're trying to do and say, okay, how do we make this math problem work? We just did an
Mm-hmm.
episode on models, right? All of the models that you'll use across, thousands of different versions of food businesses will help you figure out, does this work for me or not? Can this work as a business or not? And trust that most businesses don't work in their first iteration and that you'll probably have to go back to the drawing board a couple of times and sort of, figure things out and tweak things when you really get up and running. But I think sharing stories of businesses that are doing things differently, and might I add, without technology, without the use of tech. They're working with farms and farmers and other local businesses, and they're doing things differently in just a way that is proving to be successful to the tune of, I think it was millions of dollars a year,
Yeah, like
in
6.5 million.
yeah, and employing over 60 people. And here's the other thing, it was like 4 locations in total. You know what I mean? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like it's very, very exciting. But I think, I want to bring it back here and say that in a way, what I'm recommending is that we sort of turn things back in time. When I was writing my notes down for this episode, I literally wrote out, I think we need to go backwards. I think we need to refocus on regional food businesses, not, have more people striving for that national market share. I think we need regional and what I would call like non-mainstream infrastructure, which is what this business that you're mentioning has, right? Where brands can maintain more margin and keep prices
Yeah.
low while charging based on the real cost of food, right? So everyone in that supply chain benefits. And I think that we absolutely need to let go of the low margin, high volume myth of making money and instead build businesses that truly work for founders while providing real value to their customers. And here's the thing, and I don't know if I've ever said it as explicitly as this before, this is what we do. We
Yeah.
help people build financially successful businesses. And the majority of the time, they are not national brands. Do we work with national brands? Sure. But the 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 most excited I get is when, as you said, someone can do less and make more while not pulling back on serving their customer. In fact, they're serving their
Yeah.
customers better.
Not pulling back on serving their customer, not pulling back on what they want to accomplish in the world,
Yeah.
right? And their
Yeah.
mission and the quality of their product. And I have to say, Sarah, to me, that sounds like the dream.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I think, another thing I sort of said earlier is like for us as a brand, for the Good Food CFO to say we get behind regional businesses is a little scary. I'm going to kind of put that out there vulnerably, because to me personally, it feels like there's a risk of someone saying, you think small, or, you don't believe in good food brands or something like that. And that's not it. I think big, and I think that brands can have bigger impacts when they're smaller. And I want to thank Siete Foods and Pepsi for bringing me here in this thought process. I mentioned to you, Chelsea, when I was writing down my thoughts, or I messaged you maybe, and I said, well, that didn't go as I thought it was going to. I thought, I had sat back, I had observed, I had listened to, the hot takes and people's emotions and feelings online. I had listened to several episodes, from the founders of Siete Foods, various podcasts. I had looked at, how much money they had raised and sort of learned how they were going about growing their business. And I thought, well, this might be something to the effect of like the rise and sale of Siete, something that sort of mirrored in a way our Foxtrot episode, right? In terms of a case study. But it turned out to be really a further case study of our industry. And for me, the really cool end result is just firming where I stand and firming up what I believe is the best approach for our food industry, for our food founders, and for consumers of food. And I'm happy for the founders of Siete Foods, and I hope that they get to take a break. I hope that they're happy with how things turned out. And I hope that they're not listening to the negative opinions that are out there about them, because I trust that they did their best and they really created a beautiful thing. And I'm thankful, as I said, for the opportunity to think about this through the lens of their business and this transaction with Pepsi.
And Sarah, I want to express my gratitude to you and on behalf of everyone listening for sharing your warm take. I think it's really inspiring, and we are trying to make a difference, and I think we're achieving that. So thank you. Looking for more content like this? Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll see weekly podcast episodes as well as other content related to the show. Just visit youtube.com/@thegoodfoodcfo.
Thank you for joining us here today. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or inspiring in any way, please share it with your founder friends on social and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It's the #1 way to help good food founders find the show. We'll be back with a brand new episode next week.